Most people think obedience is created by noise. They think the powerful person is the one who speaks first, interrupts hardest, fills every silence, and makes the room feel his temper before anyone has time to think. That is the version of power insecure people worship because it is easy to recognize. It is loud, theatrical, and primitive. But Machiavelli understood something far more useful. Lasting obedience is rarely forced in the obvious moment. It is prepared in perception long before any command is spoken. By the time the order arrives, the room has already decided whether resistance feels natural or expensive. That is why some people spend their entire lives demanding respect and never receive it. Others barely raise their voice, and people adjust around them automatically. The difference is not just status, money, beauty, or aggression. It is the invisible weight of presence. People are always scanning for it. Every room runs a silent calculation. Who here needs approval? Who can be pressured? Who can be emotionally moved? Who can be delayed, flattered, ignored, or provoked? And who carries consequences without displaying them? Before anyone consciously decides what they think of you, their nervous system has already started ranking your gravity. This is the first truth most people avoid. Obedience does not begin when you try to control others. It begins when other people sense that controlling you will be difficult. The weak arrive already, asking the room for terms. They explain too much. They smile too quickly. They leak anxiety through speed, overreaction, and unnecessary warmth. They try to show that they are good, fair, understandable, and safe. They think this makes them respected. In reality, it makes them legible. And what is legible is manageable. Machiavelli never wrote for people who wanted to be harmless. He wrote for people who wanted to understand how human beings actually move when interest, fear, image, and ambition enter the same space. People say they want honesty, gentleness, transparency, and emotional availability. Often they do, in private life and in stable relationships. But in structures of power, they obey something else first. They obey certainty. They obey consequence. They obey the person whose center does not visibly shift when the atmosphere changes. They may not admire that person morally. They may not even like them, but they still adjust themselves around them. That is because human beings are not only social, they are strategic. They constantly read where permission ends and cost begins. They watch tone, pacing, restraint, and reaction. A person who reacts to everything teaches the room how to move them. A person who explains everything teaches the room how to drain them. A person who needs to be liked teaches the room exactly where leverage lies. But a person who can remain calm while everyone else searches for footing creates a very different sensation. He does not seem empty, he seems expensive. This is why the strongest aura is never built through imitation of coldness. Permanent coldness is a costume. It is still predictable. Once people understand that you will always respond with distance, they adapt. They build immunity to your frost. They stop feeling your presence and start treating it as background weather. Real authority cannot be static. It must feel controlled, not repetitive, selective, not mechanical. That is why aura is not a mood. It is an architecture. It is the disciplined design of how people experience consequence, uncertainty, access, and emotional leverage in relation to you. If you understand that, a room begins to look different. You stop asking how to appear dominant and start asking a better question. What does my presence reward? What does it punish? What does it reveal about my dependence? What have I made easy in others? And what have I made costly? Those questions matter because people rarely obey speeches. They obey structures. They obey patterns. They obey the emotional economics of interaction. If approval is cheap, they waste it. If boundaries are loud, they test them. If your moods can be read, they learn the buttons. If your self-worth needs a witness, they eventually own the stage beneath your feet. This is why many people fail even when they have talent. Talent can make people notice you, but it does not make them obey. Intelligence can make people admire you, but it does not make them align. Charm can attract, but attraction is not authority. Authority begins when other people sense that your internal frame is not available for negotiation on ordinary terms. They feel that your reactions are chosen, your access is selective, your standards are not theatrical, and your silence is not emptiness but measurement. The moment that feeling appears, the room begins reorganizing itself without being told. Notice how different that is from aggression. Aggression announces power because it fears doubt. Invisible weight does not announce. It lets other people discover the cost of misreading it. The loud person wants immediate emotional impact. The stronger person wants durable behavioral adjustment. One demands attention, the other changes calculation. That is the difference between force and gravity. Force pushes, gravity rearranges. And gravity is always tied to need. The room obeys whoever needs the room least. This does not mean apathy. It means non-dependence. When people sense that you do not need their approval to stabilize your identity, they lose one of the main tools used to manage ordinary social life. Most people are moving through the world asking hidden questions. Do you like me? Do you understand me? Do I still matter here? Am I winning? Am I safe? Those questions leak from the body even when the mouth stays silent. That leakage lowers rank instantly. It tells the room that your peace is waiting for feedback. The beginning of a strong aura, then, is not dominance over others. It is the removal of visible dependence within yourself. The less you ask from the room emotionally, the more the room begins giving without being asked. People call this presence, but presence is only the surface word. Underneath it is something colder and more exact. It is a shift in incentives. It is the moment resistance stops feeling playful and starts feeling irrational. It is the moment alignment feels easier than testing you, and that is when obedience begins, long before anyone notices that it has started. If this already changes the way you look at power, stay with it. Most people study performance. Almost no one studies gravity. The first law after invisible weight is controlled unpredictability. Most people are too readable to command serious obedience. Their moods can be mapped, their triggers can be found, their vanity can be fed, their guilt can be activated, their need for harmony can be exploited. Once people know what reliably flatters you, softens you, angers you, or reassures you, they possess a private manual for managing your behavior. They may never say it aloud, but they begin using that manual immediately. This is why many people feel strangely disrespected in the same relationships where they are constantly understood. They have become too easy to steer. Machiavelli knew that predictability comforts inferiors and empowers rivals. What can be calculated can be gamed. What can be gamed can be gradually weakened. This is why a strong aura cannot be built on emotional consistency in the childish sense of always being warm, always being available, always being easy, always being visibly pleased, always explaining your reasons, or always offering closure. People should know your standards. They should not know the full map of your internal weather. They should feel structure, not access to your nervous system. This is where many people make the amateur mistake of becoming permanently cold. They think unreadability means frozen behavior. It does not. A person who is cold every day becomes as predictable as a machine. Others adapt to it. They learn that there is no reward in the system, no variance, no movement, no surprise. Over time, even your distance becomes boring. The room stops respecting it and starts filing it away as personality. To influence people deeply, your presence must not be random, but it must remain only partially decodable. That means warmth exists, but it is selective. Access exists, but it is earned. Attention exists, but it is not a public utility. The powerful understand something that weak people miss. Behavior bends toward whatever your presence rewards. If every person gets the same smile, the same emotional energy, the same patience, the same softness, then your approval becomes common currency. Common currency does not change conduct. Scarcity does. This is why selective reward is one of the hidden engines of obedience. The room quickly learns what draws you closer and what quietly shuts doors. Competence gets attention. Discipline gets trust. Honesty gets access. Restraint gets room. Loyalty gets reach. But games, chaos, excuses, disrespect, and theatrical weakness are met with less and less oxygen. That does not require threats. In fact, loud threats usually expose insecurity. A man who constantly reminds others that he can punish them is often announcing that he fears being tested. Stronger people do something simpler. They alter emotional economics. They make certain forms of behavior productive and other forms expensive. They do not negotiate standards every hour. They let others discover that the path to closeness is alignment and the path to distance is friction. Once this becomes consistent, the room starts regulating itself. People call this charisma when they cannot explain it. Often, it is structured reinforcement. This is also why weak leaders drown in endless explanation. They believe obedience comes from proving that every decision is reasonable and that every feeling has been considered. Sometimes explanation is necessary, but when explanation becomes a ritual of reassurance, authority leaks out of it. Every repeated defense teaches others that your decision is still on trial. Every visible need to be understood lowers the cost of resistance. Soon, the room is no longer adapting to your standards. Your standards are adapting to the room. The stronger method is different. Be clear, be fair when fairness serves the objective, but never make the mistake of making your whole emotional system available for public inspection. People do not need access to your uncertainty in order to cooperate. In many cases, they need the opposite. They need to feel that your standards are not improvisations created by pressure. They need to see that their moods do not revise your frame. The moment they sense that your boundaries change according to who is in front of you, obedience weakens. They stop reading principle and start reading appetite. Controlled unpredictability also matters, because it protects you from emotional capture. The moment a rival knows that guilt always works, they use guilt. The moment a manipulator learns that praise melts you, they flatter you. The moment a subordinate sees that anger destabilizes you, they provoke you. But when your reactions remain measured, selective, and impossible to harvest on command, something shifts. People stop reaching for cheap tools. They begin adjusting themselves instead. That is the real purpose of being hard to read. It is not mystery for its own sake. It is the defense of strategic freedom. A powerful aura, then, is not built by becoming inhuman. It is built by becoming difficult to condition. You can be warm, you can be generous, you can even be deeply attentive. But your warmth cannot be automatic. Your generosity cannot be blind, and your attention cannot be easy to summon through emotional performance. The room must feel that access to you is shaped by standards, not by pressure. Once that becomes visible, people start obeying before they realize they are doing it. They become more careful with tone. They stop testing boundaries carelessly. They seek your regard by adjusting behavior, not by demanding accommodation. This is the hidden meaning of selective reward. It is not about playing games with everyone around you. It is about refusing to train people to disregard your value. Many people teach others to exhaust them because they reward interruption with attention, disrespect with argument, inconsistency with patience, and manipulation with emotional labor. Then they wonder why they are surrounded by people who keep taking. The answer is simple. Human beings repeat what works. If access remains available after disorder, disorder becomes normal. If your presence becomes more selective after disorder, the system changes. And systems matter more than speeches. 100 declarations of strength are weaker than one stable pattern people can feel. Let them experience that truth directly. Let them discover that discipline brings closeness and chaos brings distance. Let them notice that your approval is real, but not cheap. Let them feel that your warmth exists, but cannot be extorted. The room will understand faster than you think. People learn the architecture of a presence long before they learn its philosophy. Remember that. Weak people want to be universally liked. Stronger people teach the room what earns alignment. If that distinction lands, keep going. The entire structure depends on it. The third law is calm consequence. This is where weak people usually fail, because they confuse authority with visible intensity. They think consequences become real only when announced dramatically, repeated emotionally, or delivered with enough force to display injury. That is a childish model of power. It depends on spectacle. It also teaches everyone around you that your boundary does not exist until your emotion appears. Once people learn that, they stop respecting the boundary itself and start watching your temperature instead. They are no longer adapting to principle. They are gambling on how much disorder they can create before your feelings activate. Machiavelli would have recognized this weakness immediately. The person who cannot separate consequence from mood is always open to manipulation. Rivals provoke him. Inferiors delay him. Opportunists flatter him when he is useful and resist him when he is tired. Why? Because his standards are not experienced as structure. They are experienced as episodes. And episodes can be weighted out. A strong aura cannot be episodic. It must make consequence feel calm, certain, and almost administrative. The room should sense that disorder does not wound your pride. It simply changes your decision. This matters more than most people understand. Emotional punishment creates drama. Calm consequence creates obedience. The first invites conflict, interpretation, and gossip. The second changes incentives. If someone betrays trust and you explode for 10 minutes but change nothing afterward, the room learns that your anger is noise. If someone betrays trust and access quietly narrows, opportunity disappears, and your tone remains steady, the room learns that standards are real. You do not need a speech. The system itself speaks. That is why the strongest people almost never threaten loudly. Threats are often requests for behavioral change disguised as strength. They reveal a hidden hope that the other person will correct themselves so that you do not have to act. But once your authority depends on repeated warning, it begins to decay. People sense hesitation. They sense that your standards exist only if they are emotionally acknowledged by those violating them. Calm consequence removes that weakness. It says, in effect, your agreement is not required for the outcome to change. This is how obedience becomes easier than conflict. A person who disrespects you should not always receive a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes they should simply experience less access. A person who wastes your time should not always receive a lecture. Sometimes they should lose opportunity. A person who lies should not always receive moral theater. Sometimes they should be repositioned permanently. The key is that consequence must feel proportional, impersonal, and repeatable. The room must understand that your standards are not designed to create fear for its own sake. They are designed to protect order. Once that impression forms, you become much harder to test. People may still disagree with you. They may still resent you, but they begin calculating more carefully because they know your reactions are not loose emotional events. They know something changes when lines are crossed. That knowledge creates an internal break, and that internal break is the beginning of obedience. You are no longer pleading for respect. You are organizing conditions under which disrespect becomes inefficient. This law also changes the way you carry yourself physically. A person who depends on anger to prove seriousness usually leaks energy everywhere. He leans forward too quickly. He nods too much. He fills pauses because silence makes him feel powerless. He speaks before the room has fully turned toward him because he fears losing control of attention. A stronger aura moves differently. Stillness replaces hurry. The body stops asking permission. The gaze stops trying to win approval. Even in disagreement, there is less visible strain. Not because nothing matters, but because urgency is no longer being used to manufacture rank. That stillness matters because the human brain reacts to compressed energy differently than it reacts to theatrical expansion. Anyone can puff up, anyone can speak louder, anyone can borrow aggression a few minutes. But stillness under pressure feels more expensive. It suggests reserves. It creates the sensation that movement, if it comes, will be deliberate and costly. This is why certain people become heavy the moment they stop fidgeting. They have removed the little leaks that tell the room they are uncertain, eager, or desperate to be received correctly. The absence of leakage becomes power. The same principle applies to speech. Weak people overtalk because they are trying to carry their authority through explanation. Stronger people let fewer words do more work. They are not vague for the sake of style. They are economical because economy itself implies rank. A person who feels compelled to justify every boundary lowers its price. A person who can state, decide, and remain still changes the room in a more serious way. Others begin hearing consequence behind the sentence, even when the sentence is short. This is where the aura starts feeling almost physical. You are no longer taking up space through expansion. You are increasing density. People begin feeling that your approval is not casual, your time is not cheap, your standards are not experimental, and your displeasure does not need performance to become real. That sensation rearranges conduct before any formal order is given. It also prevents the common mistake of confusing rage with force. Rage is often the advertisement of injury. Calm consequence is the administration of hierarchy. If you want obedience, remember this distinction. You do not need everyone to fear your emotion. You need them to believe your standards remain intact, whether or not emotion appears. Once they see that, they stop treating your reactions as the center of the system. They start treating your decisions that way. That shift is everything. It turns you from a person with moods into a person with gravity. And gravity grows when panic disappears from your face. The room never fully obeys someone who still looks negotiable under pressure. Stay with this point, because most failures of authority begin exactly where people confuse feeling powerful with being obeyed. The fourth law is effortless certainty, and it may be the most misunderstood. People hear the phrase and imagine a relaxed style, a polished surface, or some theatrical performance of indifference. That is not the point. Effortless certainty does not mean you do not work. It means the room does not get to watch you bleed in order to believe your results. Most people sabotage their own authority by displaying too much friction. They narrate the pressure they are under. They advertise their exhaustion. They explain how difficult everything has been. They leak the backstage in an attempt to earn sympathy, understanding, or moral credit. In doing so, they become measurable. This is disastrous for power. The moment people can clearly see the mechanics of your struggle, they begin placing you inside ordinary limits. They no longer see force, they see process. They no longer feel consequence, they feel effort. And effort, once displayed too openly, tends to invite comparison rather than obedience. Others begin thinking, if this cost him that much, then he is operating near his limit. If he is near his limit, he can be stretched. If he can be stretched, he can be negotiated. The entire emotional geometry changes. Machiavelli understood the value of appearance not as vanity, but as strategy. People do not respond only to what is true. They respond to what alters their expectation of future outcomes. If your execution appears calm under pressure, others infer reserves you may never have to display. If your victories arrive without visible strain, rivals begin assuming there is more where that came from. They do not merely notice competence. They start imagining depth, and imagination, in matters of hierarchy, is often stronger than direct evidence. This is why people have always been unsettled by those who perform difficult things with composure. The unsettling part is not perfection, it is asymmetry. The room feels how hard a situation is. Then it watches one person remain measured inside it. Immediately, a question arises in everyone else. If this pressure is bending me and not bending him, what does he have that I do not? That question silently promotes rank. It creates the sense that his frame is operating from a different altitude. But effortless certainty alone is not enough. Without controlled mystery, it can still produce envy. This is where the strategic flaw enters. If you appear too flawless, too finished, too sealed off, weaker people do not only feel impressed, they feel accused. Your image becomes a mirror for their own inconsistency, vanity, laziness, and dependence. Most people cannot tolerate that reflection for long. They start looking for cracks. If they cannot find one, they invent alliances to create one. This is why pure perfection is often socially dangerous. It produces hostile fascination. The more intelligent strategy is to give the room a chosen weakness, not a real vulnerability that damages your center, a harmless imperfection that absorbs envy and lowers defensive hostility. Let people think you are careless about some trivial detail. Let them believe you are slightly absent-minded in one domain that does not matter. Let them assume you have one minor vanity or one useless limitation. The ego of the room relaxes the moment it finds something it can privately feel superior to. That relief protects you. It keeps rivals busy with the wrong measurement. This is not dishonesty in the cheap sense. It is narrative management. You are deciding where underestimation is allowed to land, and that matters because total opacity creates pressure. Pressure searches for outlets. A chosen flaw acts like a controlled vent. It gives observers just enough humanity to stop them from coordinating against your image, while leaving your actual leverage untouched. They walk away comforted by the illusion that they have seen through you. Meanwhile, the structure that really matters remains intact. Controlled mystery completes this system. You do not reveal every motive, every irritation, every next move, every long-term intention, or every insecurity. Readable people are easy to position. If others know exactly what you want from every interaction, they learn how to bargain with you. If they know every wound you carry, they learn where pressure works. If they know your next move in advance, they begin arranging counters before you even arrive. To build an aura that produces obedience, partial visibility is essential. People should feel your standards clearly, but they should never feel that they possess the full map. That is different from evasiveness. Evasiveness looks weak because it smells like fear of exposure. Controlled mystery looks strong because it coexists with clarity. You are not hiding in fog. You are simply refusing to make yourself fully available for psychological consumption. The room knows enough to trust your structure, but not enough to manipulate your center. This distinction matters. Vague people are distrusted. Overexposed people are used. Partially known people are respected at a distance. Once effortless certainty, strategic flaw, and controlled mystery begin working together, your aura changes quality. People stop seeing isolated behaviors and start sensing design. Your calm under pressure suggests reserves. Your visible imperfection reduces envy. Your unreadable center prevents exploitation. Together they create a paradox the room cannot easily resolve. You are understandable enough to seem human, but not so understandable that anyone feels ownership over your psychology. You are effective enough to command attention, but not so performative that attention feels invited. This is where obedience becomes more subtle and more durable. People do not merely respond to your words, they pre-adjust around what they think your standards, limits, and unseen capacities might be. They become more careful with timing. They choose their tone more deliberately. They speak with more internal editing. They do not want to discover the wrong edge of your structure by accident. That caution is not always conscious. Much of it happens below language. The nervous system simply learns that you are not easy terrain, and that is one of the highest forms of presence. Not making people afraid to breathe, but making them instinctively more exact around you. That exactness is worth more than intimidation. because intimidation creates eventual rebellion. Exactness creates order. If this part is clear, the last law becomes unavoidable. Without it, everything above turns into costume. All of these laws fail without the last one. You can carry invisible weight, reward selectively, enforce calm consequence, project effortless certainty, and preserve controlled mystery, yet still remain weak at the core if you are secretly hungry for one thing: validation. This is the deepest test because it cannot be faked for long. Human beings are extraordinarily sensitive to need. They may not always name it correctly, but they feel it. They feel when your silence is strategic, and they feel when your silence is a plea to be noticed. They feel when your restraint comes from discipline, and they feel when it comes from fear. They feel when your calm is power, and they feel when your calm is only a trembling performance waiting for applause. That is why the desire to be feared can be just as pathetic as the desire to be loved. Both still depend on the audience. Both still ask the room to certify your existence. One says, "Admire me." The other says, "Tremble before me." But each is still a form of begging. Each still hands over the center of value to other people. And once your value depends on how others react, you can be bribed, destabilized, delayed, or manipulated. Flattery works, rejection works, outrage works, shame works, guilt works, praise works. You may look powerful from a distance, but your nervous system is still on a leash. Machiavelli's deeper lesson is not cruelty. It is detachment from the emotional marketplace. Most social life runs on exchange. I recognize you, you recognize me. I protect your image, you protect mine. I validate your value, you validate mine. This economy is so normal that most people never notice it. They simply feel distressed when the exchange pauses. They become reactive when appreciation weakens, when admiration cools, when deference is not offered, when they are ignored, when they are not immediately understood. Their ego begins negotiating for supply. That negotiation is the hidden death of aura. The strongest presence exits that economy. It does not refuse all connection, it refuses dependency. The difference is absolute. A person who still wants to be respected may act disciplined, but will eventually reveal desperation when disrespect appears. A person who no longer needs respect in order to remain internally organized behaves differently. He still notices insult. He still sees power plays. He still reads sabotage, vanity, and disorder with precision. But he processes them as data before he processes them as injury. That sequence changes everything. It prevents pride from hijacking strategy. This is the sovereign state that weaker people misread as coldness. It is not coldness. It is non-purchase. You cannot buy it with compliments because it is not starving. You cannot blackmail it with shame because it has already accepted that power polarizes. You cannot destabilize it with rejection because belonging is no longer the source of identity. You cannot bait it with outrage because it does not worship immediate emotional discharge. When people realize that the usual tools no longer work, they experience something close to vertigo. Their habits of influence fail all at once. And when manipulation fails, obedience often begins. This is why the strongest aura belongs to the person who can walk away. Not necessarily from every room, every relationship, or every opportunity, but from the emotional need that usually chains people to bad negotiation. He can walk away from applause. He can walk away from being liked. He can walk away from the fantasy of being perfectly understood. He can walk away from proving his strength on demand. That freedom changes posture, pacing, eye contact, speech, and decision-making. It does not make him passive. It makes him harder to recruit into other people's emotional theater. At that point, your aura becomes paradox in the most serious sense. You can be warm, but your warmth is not begging. You can be kind, but your kindness is not submission. You can be patient, but your patience is not permission for disorder. You can be visible, but not available for endless psychological consumption. You can listen carefully, without surrendering your frame. You can move through chaos without inhaling it. Most importantly, you no longer need to dominate every interaction to preserve the idea of yourself. The center holds without witnesses. That is what makes obedience natural rather than forced. People align when your reality feels heavier than theirs. They sense that your standards are not powered by mood, your access is not powered by loneliness, your attention is not powered by flattery, and your decisions are not powered by panic. Resistance begins to feel wasteful because the ordinary levers do not move you. Alignment begins to feel efficient because clarity, restraint, and consequence all flow in the same direction. You do not have to threaten every outcome. Your independence does the heavy lifting. This is also where the title becomes true. How do you build an aura so strong it makes people obey you? Not by acting bigger, not by performing cruelty, not by becoming a statue of permanent ice. You build it by altering calculation. You remove visible need. You become selectively rewarding. You make consequence calm. You carry pressure without leaking panic. You allow one controlled flaw while protecting the center. You remain partially known, never fully possessed. And beneath all of it, you starve the ego's addiction to validation until your frame no longer waits for other people to tell it what it is worth. Most people will not do this. They will hear ideas like these, enjoy the fantasy for an hour, then return to over-explaining themselves, negotiating with disrespect, rewarding chaos with attention, and asking rooms full of ordinary people to stabilize their identity. They will choose comfort over gravity. They will prefer being digestible to being difficult to move. That is their decision. Yours is different now. You know that obedience is not a trick of language. It is an architecture of incentives, mystery, consequence, and inner non-dependence. Build that architecture long enough, and one day you will enter a room, say very little, and still feel the room adjusting around you, not because you demanded it, because your presence made resistance feel irrational. Most people chase attention. Few build gravity. Fewer still become undeniable. Decide which one you are.